Yep, so I've been involved in the pain ontology. It's been a good group of several ontologists, several people who are more subject matter experts. Alex already mentioned a few people here, just shouting out Bill and Alex themselves. Um, Dottie, several of you are probably familiar with her. She was involved a little bit more recently. Bronwyn, of course, and Ava and Roger have all been contributing a lot of really good subject matter expertise. So that's been going pretty well. So this is probably going to be a bit of a smaller update. Our group has been working a little bit more using questionnaires for helping us understand what sort of information is important, relevant to this domain, what people are really caring about. So we're drawing from those to understand what sorts of terms we want to include in the ontologies and what connections we want to make between various different things. So we've been using, for example, like detect questionnaire here is what I have as an example for different sorts of questions that they include sort of guiding us how we want to design the ontology. There's also a brief pain inventory as well for that. And Opera CPSQ, that project, they also have their own questionnaires as well. And then we've also been using the International Classification of Oral Facial Pain, which is this terminology for oral facial pain related terms. Alex already mentioned earlier that Ava's been doing quite a bit of work with that. Sort of been using that once again for understanding the domain, what sorts of things that they treat as important and should be included in the ontology as well. So one of the main things that we're focusing on is how to represent pain in all the different dimensions that it can be experienced in. So there's a classic division for pain as being nociceptive, nociplastic, neuropathic. Really, the classic division is between nociceptive and neuropathic. Nociplastic is a bit more recent, where nociceptive pain is just going to be more traditional concepts or more standard sorts of pain experiences. So like a classic putting your hand on a hot stove, you feel pain. That's going to be nociceptive pain. Uh, your nociceptors are receiving this external stimulus. So most cases of pain where things are working properly are going to be nociceptive. Neuropathic are going to be more cases of pain where there's some sort of pain experience because there's some perhaps like damage to the nerves themselves that can result in neuropathic pain. And then nociplastic pain is this more recent term. It's sometimes is used as a sort of a black box of just putting all cases of pain where we're not really sure what is causing it, sometimes go in there. So we're trying to nail down a more concrete definition because this is a good example of one where there's a lot of confusion in the space about exactly how to define it. We're going in the direction of it being, at least as far as I'm aware right now, we're leaning towards it being pain that's going to be involving some sort of dysfunction in signaling in the central nervous system. So cases of nociplastic pain would be something like fibromyalgia is the primary example people bring up. Nociplastic pain, that's a good example of something where it's pain and we're not fully sure the mechanism involved in what's causing that. But anyways, we got this primary division in different sorts of pains, but there's also a whole lot of other ways you can divvy up different sorts of pains. So you can divide them by temporal features. Is it acute pain, persistent pain, qualitative features, like just how it actually feels. It's burning pain, dull, aching, that sort of thing or the spatial extent or distribution? Is it localized? If so, where is it localized? Is it multifocal? Is the pain moving around the body? That sort of thing. So there's lots of different ways you can divvy it up. So what we're trying to do is use plenty of defined classes so that particular instance of pain can be fall under multiple of these at the same time. This is especially important with regard to nociceptive, nociplastic, and neuropathic, where the SMEs that we've been talking to have been emphasizing that these aren't really sharp divisions. The same pain experience can be in some ways nociceptive and in other ways neuropathic, according to them. So we're trying to avoid very sharp divisions in that I guess we want sharp division, but avoiding mutually exclusive um, aspects of it. Whoops, sorry about that. I just got an Amber Alert. Hopefully that didn't you guys didn't hear about that. Anyways, um, so some of the work that we've been doing has also made impacts on other ontologies. As an example, for the gene ontology, we've been looking around for various different ontologies, different ways that they'll define pain. We want to be adhering to good reuse practices. So we've been looking around at how other people have been defining things. And we've been noticing some issues with a lot of different ways that other groups have been defining pain. As an example of this, for the gene ontology, originally they had a bit of a longer definition of pain. The only thing I want to emphasize here is they add in their definition that it's defined as a physical sensation of discomfort or distress caused by injury or illness. Um, we were in conversation with gene ontology folks a good bit because we were interested in using this definition, but through conversations with them, we found that they didn't really intend for their pain term to represent an actual like first person subjective experience of pain. In the gene ontology, they don't want to be dealing with any subjective experience sorts of stuff. Instead, they were only really intending to represent mechanical processes that might lead up to an experience of pain. So as a result of that, we got them to change their definition so it was a little clearer that they weren't intending to represent some first-person experience of pain. They end up getting rid of that physical sensation part of the definition. And then so we've been exploring various other definitions that currently exist for defining pain and other ontologies. And again, we're still finding that there's various issues in the ways a lot of other people will define these sorts of things. So, for example, both EFO and mesh ontologies, they have the exact same definition of pain. They say it's an unpleasant sensation induced by noxious stimuli, which are detected by nerve endings of nociceptive neurons. This is not actually always the case. As I indicated earlier, with neuropathic pain, you're not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily involve any detection of noxious stimuli by nociceptive neurons, or the nerve endings of nociceptive neurons. And then additionally, they also end up treating pain as a subclass of quality, which we don't think is correct. We're treating it as a process instead. So for those reasons, weren't very happy with how they're defining things. I already brought up the gene ontology, where their definition ended up turning out to be a bit unclear. We got them to change it, but now based on the way it's changed, it's not really capturing what we intend by pain, where we do want to capture that first person experience that's involved with pain. There's also emotion ontology. I'm not going to read through that whole definition, but we were noticing some issues with that definition as well. One, it's very, we think, overly complicated in a way where it doesn't really add a lot of clarity to what pain is. It also commits itself to some potentially controversial positions on the nature of pain. So they're making it emotion as necessarily involved with pain. We've talked to some subject matter experts who aren't quite sure if that's correct. Um, and there might also be some issues of some circularity because they do refer to pain in the definition and for feeling of pain. So there might be some issues of that there as well. Uh, as a side note, OGMS also pretty much adopts this definition as well, but the only difference is instead of saying it's a subjective affective feeling, they just say it's a bodily process. There's also an organization, IASP, where they have their own definition of pain, unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. It's not a terrible definition, better than some of the other ones, but again, they also make this emotion aspect necessarily part of or involved with what pain is, and that's a bit more controversial. So we're still in the process of going through, sort of debating whether we want to adopt some other ontologies, pain definition, or we want to just go ahead and create our own class. I think probably that's what's going to end up happening there. And then So currently at this stage, we're just sort of involved in making some design patterns, creating spreadsheets of definitions, that sort of thing. So, and we're currently in the process of writing a paper for the work that we're doing. That's not quite ready yet. So we've still got quite a bit of work to do at the moment, but we've been able to work out some things. So, for example, the pain as we're understanding it is going to be causally downstream of the gene ontology sensory perception of pain rather than those being the same exact things. And we've been doing some design patterns for how we exactly want to treat this multidimensionality aspect for pain. So we're making use of a lot of um, inferred axioms for, let's say, nociceptive pain resulting from the knee versus nociplastic pain. We're going to want to handle those using some inferences down there. Another thing I can highlight is that we're using a experience in actually, I don't think that's in this diagram, but separately, we have a different object property experienced in object property where we're just trying to capture that an experience of pain, it feels like it's occurring in some part of the body, but this we're treating this as distinct from, say, occurring in relation, where strictly speaking, say you have pain, it feels like it's in your arm. The pain experience as we're understanding it, it isn't itself really in the arm, it's happening in the brain. So we're using this experience in relation to sort of capture this notion that it feels like it's occurring in a certain part of the body, even though the pain event isn't actually happening there. Um, I think that about does it for anything I have to present. So whatever remaining time, I can do questions.
Okay. Since Finn finished a bit earlier, there is time for a question, if anybody has any. If not,
I could hear people talking, but I couldn't hear if there was a question asked. So Fede,
Oh
if you're
no,
able to repeat.
no, you're
Okay.
fine, Finn.
Okay,
Barry was
cool.
just asking me to make a comment. I guess the only thing, this has been slow going work. I mean, we all
Mhm.
think we understand pain, but it's been an interesting project in that when you start to discuss this with people who, I guess, research pain, you get all these different dimensions. And then you present them with these different definitions from ontologies, and they say, well, so not trying to pick on the emotion ontology, but in that definition, it says it's a kind of subjective affective feeling. So I go to the psychologist, I say, what's a subjective affective feeling? And lots of them look at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, so there's kind of that space to navigate. There are combinational, I guess, explosions you have to deal in here. Pain can be chronic, it can be throbbing, uh, it can be sharp, it can be sharp and throbbing, it can, right?
Mhm.
So we want to be careful to capture, to be able to adequately represent all of those dimensions. And also, I'm really interested in the number of different like assays that researchers use to, I guess, make inferences about the kinds of pain that someone, uh, about the mechanisms that might be causing a particular kind of pain. And as Finn noted, it's really hard to make these clear distinctions between nociceptive and neuropathic or nociplastic, because a given experience may actually evolve all three of the mechanisms that are associated like with those.
Yeah. Also, I just want to point something out about the diagram here. Th this isn't saying central nervous system is a subclass of neuropathic pain. There's neuropathy down there, but it just got cut off by the cell, just in case anybody was confused by that.
that's great. So there is room
Cool.
for future research as well.